Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hot Seat with Cognizant Clay. I am your host, Clayton Terrio. Today on the show, we have Eddie Rice and Louise Russo. They are the co-founders and co-chairs of the Canadian Coalition for Mobility Challenged Drivers. The coalition is focused on providing a barrier-free environment for disabled drivers. I hope you guys enjoy it. Well, first of all, thank you guys for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm pretty excited for it.
Well, thank you for having us on. Really very thoughtful of you. Thank you.
We love any media we can get.
Exactly, and I figured I'd give you guys a bit of a platform. Hopefully enough people see it and are interested in the app and the coalition. So, well, just to start off, how are you guys doing today? How's it going on your end?
So far, so good. Got no complaints today.
Awesome. So I'm gonna do, so when I ask questions, I'll go Eddie first and then Louise. I like keeping it in alphabetical order. That's just my how I am, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, I guess. I'm organized, which is good. So Eddie, I'll just start with your story. So you are a polio survivor and you were a prosthetist at Sunnybrook for a number of years before, unfortunately, you had to retire due to post-polio syndrome. Did polio affect you at all as a younger person, or was it more later on that it started to affect you physically?
Well, with polio, it depends on the initial attack that you get. My initial attack, I was 18 months old when I got the onset of polio, and for the next 18 months, I spent in an iron lung. And because of the advent of the iron lung, I survived. I mean, people that didn't have access to an iron lung in those days, they simply died because it affected the diaphragm and you simply stopped breathing. So the advent of the iron lung allowed you to continue to breathe, although it was mechanically stimulated, until the virus left your system. And that's why we call ourselves polio survivors, because we are the first generation to survive. And as such, science did not know what the long-term effects were. In other words, cancer was around for many years and a lot of other diseases. So they know what it does to a human body. But when polio came around and people survived in the late 40s and 50s, they didn't know what to expect for long-term effects. So in my particular case, which turns out to be quite common, after the initial attack, like I said, I was in an iron lung for 18 months. And when I came out, most of my body functions returned, except for my lower extremities, except for the legs. So for a good portion of my life, I was walking with crutches and braces, and I was mobile. I was able to get around. And being young, obviously, you were strong. And that's the theory at that time was use it or lose it. So they encouraged you to become active and develop your muscles that were remaining, that were functioning. As it turns out, that's probably the worst thing you could have done, because now that I'm in my older age, I don't have the muscles I need to function as well as I would like to. Meaning that, to describe it in layman's terms, you, in 35 to 40 years after the initial attack, which when I was about 35 years old, you get polio again in places you didn't have it before. That's to simply explain it. So in other words, my first bout around was my legs that were affected, and I was functioning very well with crutches and braces and walking around. And then when the post-polio hit, it affected my upper body to the point where I couldn't stand, even with crutches. I had to go into a mobility scooter for mobility to get around. And I had to quit my profession because I couldn't do the actual physical part of it. I had to go into another vocation to make a living. And even that I wasn't able to do for many years because the post-polio syndrome, excuse me, became even worse with the remaining muscles that were affected by my upper limbs. And they also discovered not too long ago that people that had polio that were in iron lungs, when they become seniors, like what I am now, it affects your diaphragm for breathing. because that's what wasn't functioning when you had the polio and in an iron lung. Your diaphragm wasn't operating enough to get the oxygen in and out of your lungs until the polio subsided. But now that you're in your senior years, that damage that was done has now left me with a weakened functioning diaphragm. So I have to be, very cautious as to what activities I do, especially if now with the COVID being around, and it's also a lung-related disease. I have to be extra cautious as to where I go and what I do to protect myself, as much as I can.
Exactly, and you do what you can. That's quite the story. And so how did you overcome the challenges presented with you due to polio? And furthermore, how did you overcome having to kind of change your job, basically?
Well, all those situations were a result of you have no choice. Either roll with the punches or you give up. Obviously, I wasn't the type of person that gave up. When I couldn't function anymore to be a viable income earner, I turned to being an advocate for people with disabilities. Fortunately, I have a good speaking ability and I was a number of disability groups that I belonged to. And I learned, one of the most important things I learned about being involved with disability groups is, depending on what the disability is, you have two different classes of people with disabilities. You have your able disabled and your disabled. And the disabled, through no fault of their own, but due to their disability, some of them have speaking problems or functioning problems or nonverbal or things of that nature. So the other half is the group that I belong to, where you are able to be verbal and function. And I feel as though, you have a responsibility and an image to project, to do as much as you can for people that are in a less fortunate position. In 1984, I was a chairman of a group from the National Council of Jewish Women, and their goal at the time was to find people with disabilities, young people, young adults, that were not functioning in the community. So what they researched that they did, which they found out, was for a person that's under 18 years of age or over 65, a senior, there's all kind of government programs to help you survive and get by. But if you're a young adult, there's very little available to you. So this group was put together to find as many of these people as we could, to help them integrate into society, get them to function at a higher level than what they were functioning at, socializing them, integrating them, inclusion. And we developed through the Jewish Community Center integrated programs for people to join, whether it was arts and crafts or physical activities or whatever level they were able to function at, to include them with the able-bodied community. And then in 1998, I was approached by B'nai B'rith Canada, which is the group that I'm still with today. They formed a new committee because they knew at the time that various other disability groups were petitioning the government for accessibility legislation. Accessibility legislation, like in the States, they have the ADA, which we at the time didn't have anything like that. So that's when they came up with the AODA. And through 10 years of petitioning the government, the conservative government at the time with Mike Harris was that uphill battle totally, until Dalton McGuinty came in with the Liberal government. We finally did get legislation, but it still involves a lot of determination in getting things done and fine-tuned to get the legislation to work the way we want it to work. And that's been a constant battle as it is.
Oh, definitely. So many levels of bureaucracy and just steps to get things done. Unfortunately, it's like you say, always an uphill battle, no matter what you're dealing with. And so, Louise, I'll just move on to your story a little bit. So in 2004, you were a victim of gun violence, which left you paralyzed. And that, honestly, could not imagine going through that. So after your injury, how did you overcome the new challenges and just differences presented to you?
Well, when something happens to you suddenly, you go from an able body to someone with a disability, it alters every aspect of your life in every which way you can imagine. You know, I was impacted obviously, but my family was too, and a lot of my friends, the community. It really, you know, the story went worldwide at the time. I decided very early on. I remember thinking, you know, I got to deal with this. I mean, I need to. I remember saying to my husband, um, the next morning, I said, you know, how we handle this will strengthen the roots for our children. I said, I want them to realize no matter what's thrown at them, they can always pick themselves up and move forward. You know, plus we have a child, our middle child, Jenna, has special needs. So I've been in the advocacy world for a very long time. She'll be 33 in next week. You know, so I've been always advocating way back with the Easter seals and cerebral palsy. I used to sit on the board advocating with the Toronto Catholic District School Board. I was under the Special Advisory Committee back then. So it's always been, so this kind of just rolled into that, if I may say. And I decided early on, you know, I'm going to make the best of things. And I decided to take up the advocacy a lot stronger than I've ever did for more with people with disabilities and also victims of crime. That's, you know, a passion of mine. So I sit on the board with the Office for Victims of Crime, advocate for, you know, gaps that we need to speak about, which there is a lot of, and just to educate, we're advisors to the Minister of the Attorney General. You know, dealing with, you know, what I found through it all, it was really interesting. I found by helping others through volunteering, you know, and I do that as peer support with Spinal Cord Ontario, and also through the Alliance group with SCI, Spinal Cord Injury, Spinal Cord Ontario too. And doing that, I found, and also my own work with my own charity and making, you know, and helping young people believe that they can get through things. Like no matter how horrible situation may be, you can always work towards a better life and a better person yourself with doing that. And also I found that I'm the one who received back in more ways than I ever thought. Like I found that I got to meet some wonderful, wonderful people through this journey of mine. And, you know, it's put it out there in the universe and you'd be surprised at what you get back. Like I'm so touched by, you know, and I learned so much from this. I mean, a lot of it's hard work. The advocacy part is definitely getting through the red tape and trying to talk to the right people and, you know, motivate them to do something, to make change. And that's been a challenge, and I think it always will be. But you know, if we can make some strides that way, why not, right?
Exactly. And well, one thing, like your stories are very, very different, but what's alike with a lot of people is just the advocacy and the no matter what disability you have, there's always similarities between people. And I find that since I've started my cause, I've met so many amazing people that you never probably would have met if you didn't at least try to get yourself out there. And I think that's definitely very important especially when it's a sudden disability, to be able to rely on the community and others with similar disabilities, which I think is awesome. And it's always fun to meet new people regardless of their disability. So just Eddie, I'm just going to go back a bit to you with your B'nai B'rith stuff. So they approached you to head their committee for their League for Human Rights. Can you just tell me a little bit how that opportunity came about?
Well, it came about because basically B'nai B'rith, their main function nowadays is human rights projects, regardless of who's involved and what's involved. They're a human rights thing, and being disabled comes under that, people with disabilities. As a matter of fact, I got a lateral promotion. It used to be the Ontarians with disabilities of B'nai B'rith. Now it's the Canadians with this, because now I've gone nationwide. But they realize that this is an issue that affects a good 15 to 18% of the population that's not being represented properly. And they took this on as a challenge. And I was a member of B'nai B'rith. I belonged to one of their lodges, and I guess my reputation got around where head office called me in and offered me this chairmanship with the full backing of the organization. And I take on all kinds of challenges, regardless of what it is, as long as it's disability related. And I've been able to make contacts. And like Louise says, you meet a lot of interesting people along the way. A lot of them are very helpful to you. Some of them you realize, especially in government, one of the things that I learned, there are people in the government who really do want to do a good job, but then there's so many others that say, no, you can't do that. And that's why it's a continuous uphill battle. Doesn't make any sense, but that's what the reality is that we have to deal with. And it's a constant battle to make improvements, but no matter what project you take on. As a matter of fact, I should go back to the National Council of Jewish Women back in 1984 that I belonged to. They had a project which came to fruition while I was there. They were the first to build an integrated housing apartment building on Bathurst and St. Charles, where the first 2 floors had all accessible apartments, and the other floors were able-bodied apartments. But that was the first one built in Canada at the time. So they were like a groundbreaking organization at that time. But it goes to show you that once that was done and it was proven that it can be done, it can function, and it can be integrated into society. Because initially they had the same complaints. You say, well, what are all those people in wheelchairs going to do on Bathurst Street? But as it turns out, everybody integrates, they get used to it, and it functions at a higher level than where they were before.
Definitely, and there's still not enough accessible housing. Like you think 1984 really isn't that long ago that it's the first one in Canada. Like it's just it really is crazy. And so with B'nai B'rith, with that committee, what kinds of things are you responsible for?
Well, it depends on what what they call hot button issues are at the time. Currently, I'm working with a lot of the SILT, the community housing, Community for Independent Living,
Yeah.
and the CWO. For the city of Toronto wants to bring in these nuisance e-scooters. And I have a personal experience with them. I was just in Florida last winter, in Fort Lauderdale, in a tourist area. And in one block area, I had to rely on Good Samaritans 3 times to move these scooters off the sidewalk, because people rent them. And that's the beauty of renting these e-scooters. You can get them here and leave them there. But when they leave them anywhere. And they block the sidewalk, they block the curb cuts, they block entrances to buildings, because they simply don't care. There's no penalties for it. You don't need insurance to use these things. You don't need a license to use these things. They're not required to bring them to a designated depot, yet they're all over the place. And people that are disabled that use mobility devices, such as myself and Louise that uses a wheelchair, and a person who's blind, they got double trouble, because obviously they're not going to see them. And second of all, because they're electric, they're silent. And they can sneak up on somebody and they won't know it. So even the elderly that have balance problems, it's a whole myriad of complications that arise from this. But it's the big corporations with their lobbyists, they're only concerned about making money. Where on the other hand, if you look at it, what do we really need them for?
Yeah, it's true. That's a valid point for sure.
And then the other project I'm working on it's called the EVAC chair.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get this in the building codes. It is now available in Los Angeles as standard procedure. It is basically a foldable wheelchair that's kept in the fire escape that can be opened up and say, and get a person with a disability into it. And it has basically skis on it combined with the wheels so they can slide down the emergency exits to get them out of the building. As a matter of fact, they have documented a couple of cases that this was available in the World Trade Center back in 9/11. It saved about a half a dozen people, and one of them from the 69th floor. So it makes common sense. Why don't we have this in seniors' homes, hospitals, public buildings, and even private buildings, condominiums? I mean, like even in condo that I live in, on the floor that I live in alone, there's 4 people using wheelchairs, but it's not required. And that's another uphill battle. But I'm fighting that battle too, to make it a standard part of emergency equipment that should be standard in all the buildings.
Yeah, well, it should be, and then well, thanks for your work because it's definitely very important. And so Louise, you founded again a little bit different, but same kind of alley. You founded the Louise Russo Working Against Violence Every Day nonprofit organization, and that just inspires youth and members of the community to take action against violence and just turn negatives into positives. And do you remember kind of when it clicked that you wanted to start that organization?
Actually, it was the same year I got injured. I got injured in April, and I kept thinking, there's got to be, I got to do something here and my focus always been, besides the advocacy, because with the school board and accessibility and all that, I wanted to do something for youth. And so I remember thinking about this, and early one morning, I woke up with this thought, and I said, and it was like, it was constantly gnawing at me to do something. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call my counselor. So I called and I just said, well, I have this idea. I want to put a walk together, and it's about, bringing together people and the community, and just so that we could, walk against violence and take a stand. And at that time, it was just the initial part of it. And I said, but if he doesn't think it's a great idea, that's okay. Because I kind of wanted to go away at that point, right? Well, they called me back 2 minutes later, and they said, oh, he loves the idea and he wants you to meet with him. And I went, are you sure? And he goes, yes. So we met, and it was amazing. We had over 1,000 people. We had, all levels of government had come, and it was beautiful. They closed down Western Road. They like a part of it. So we went to the park, and it was the stage was up there. It was just beautiful. Like it was. But from that, I thought, okay. And I remember looking in the audience. I'm going, this is good. The awareness part of it's good, but what else can we do? So at that point, I decided, let's change it from a walk to working against violence every day, and I wanted to gear it more towards youth. So what we've done in schools is started up the Wave Youth Action Team. And what that is young people who come together and work. They don't all know each other, but they're from the same school at different levels. It's mostly high school. And they'll go from grade 9 to grade 12. They come together and they bring their gifts to the president. Like some of them will do the public speaking, some of them will do the technical part of it, and they'll pick a topic that is youth related, and then they pick a grade, and let's say it's grade 3 or grade 7, 8, transition years into high school. They'll pick topics like, the last one we did about the cannabis, understanding the legalities of that. There was a dating, cyberbullying, bullying on its own, and just recognizing, what do you do in situations like that. And so they, organized going to different schools and presenting at that grade level. And we've gotten such great feedback, and the students were like, I remember meeting one young man, a couple of years later, we were going to a theater, and he said, Miss Russo, do you recognize me? I said, well, because I meet a lot of students, right? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't. He goes, I was on your Wave Youth Action Team and 2 years ago. And I said, you said, you know, at that point, I said to him, you have to tell me the truth. I said, now that you're out of it, I said, did you get anything out of it? He goes, that was the best time of high school in my life because I enjoyed it. He goes, I just loved doing it. And it was so fulfilling. And to know that something we cared about, that we brought that forward. And we worked with the Toronto Police with this too. I had many times, you know, I worked side by side with the Toronto Police on at these presentations, just so that they understand the legalities of that, if there was issues, you know, that we need to know. For example, they had something on sexting, and I didn't know this, but let's say a young man sends his friend something his girlfriend sent him, and all of a sudden, you know, even though he didn't, the friend didn't do anything with it, but the fact that, you know, this was on his phone, he could have been charged. So, you know, it was good to have that kind of information, and for youth to know that their rights, and also to know that, you know, what is legal and what's not. So on top of that, we also recognize young people all throughout Canada that have made a difference in community and schools through their own initiatives. And some amazing things these kids have done. Like, we had one young lady who had to leave her home. It was only for a short time, but she ran to a shelter with her mom. And she realized when she got there that they didn't have, you know, a toothbrush, and they didn't have, she said she was young and she remembers missing her little teddy bear and stuff. So what she started was, you know, getting little bags together and donations to other companies, you know, and she made sure that every child in a shelter, you know, with certain shelters in Toronto, was able to get something when they came in. That could mean it's theirs because they're running from a very horrible situation, right? I mean, to see youth inspiring other youth was absolutely, you know, that it touched me in more ways I can never tell you. And from that, we had it at the Wave Youth Empowering Day, which is a day that unfortunately this year we had to cancel because of COVID. But, you know, to bring this all together, to recognize our youth that have made a difference, to inspire other youth in the audience. Our guest speakers had their own personal stories. We had dancers that came in, and just fun and engaging. And it was like a really, you know, exciting time. I loved it. And I want to continue. And I'm trying to come up with different ideas now on what we could do during the time they're at home. And one of the ideas that I haven't launched yet, so you're the first to know, Clayton.
Wow.
Yeah. So we want to, you know, so when you're meeting someone, you're wearing the mask, right? And you still want to nod and say hello. Or so I want to do something like the eyes have it, or, you know, express smiley eyes. So I want to be able to get kids to post that, and also what they've been doing, their artwork, maybe a little dance thing, or, you know, just to get kids busy and letting us know how they're dealing with this, to giving them an outlet that way. So that's one part of what I'm doing. Then there's a bunch of other stuff anyway.
Yeah, well, that sounds crazy. Like, that sounds like a lot of fun, and like, kids are just so great anyway, no matter the age. They're always so creative, and it's always cool to see what they come up with. And I thank both of you for your long answers, because I really like long answers. I'm a talker myself, so go on as much as you want. It's you know, the more info, the merrier. So the main reason we're chatting today is what both of you are a part of, and that's the Coalition for Mobility Challenge Drivers. And you're both co-chairs and co-founders, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I got that right. So it was formed in 2017. And Eddie, again, we'll start with you. Why do you feel it was so important to start this coalition?
Well, the idea first manifested itself 7 years ago. Before I was when I became more disabled, as I mentioned, and I had to go into a scooter. By the way, I should mention, Louise and I both met in Lyndhurst. Years ago.
Cool. Yeah, I know a lot. I have a lot of friends that went there. That's cool.
Yeah, when we were first injured, struck up our friendship since then. But when I became more disabled, and like I said, I couldn't stand anymore, and my scooter became my 100% method of mobility. I had to go get a minivan with a lift that I could use so I could become mobile driving the car. But as soon as that happened, I kept saying, like society and governments and technology, they try and get people with disability going as much as they can. So you got hand controls and you got a power lift to get your scooter in the car. But then the most important part about driving a car is how do you put gas in it? Okay, so that was my rude awakening when I first became dependent on my mobility, abusing my minivan and driving around, which was great. But if I have to get from point A to point B, I had to put gas in the car. And the only way at that time, 7, 8 years ago, there were still a few, very few, and they're dying off, as you know, full service gas stations. So you either had to find a full service and drive long distances to get there, or if they were close by, then the hours of operation were very limited, or you had to, in my case, have my wife with me or a friend that when I needed gas, come with me and put some gas in my car for me, became dependent in that respect. And I just thought that there's got to be a better way. So about 7 years ago, when I was vacationing in Florida, I came across a company called Inclusion Solutions that were advertising they had a solution to the problem called Fuel Call. It was a very simple system. It was basically a big blue button with a wheelchair symbol on it by the gas pump that you rolled your window down, you push the button, it would ring inside, guy come out, fill your tank, and away you go. The problem with that solution was not every gas station had it. As a matter of fact, very few had it because it was expensive to install. And then there was the mechanics of it. Either the button didn't work or it didn't ring inside, or nobody would know you're there, things of that nature. So I was promoting it for a while because at the time it was the best solution. And that's when I got Louise involved with it because we thought maybe by getting the government involved, making it a mandatory requirement, because the AODA has a section in it for under public service that gasoline stations are to provide people with disabilities with service. Terrific. Problem with the legislation is it doesn't state how they're supposed to deliver the service to the person with a disability. So we got together and we put together a proposal. They're requiring training, the equipment, and whatever else. And we've met with government officials, and it basically went nowhere. And then I started to do it by myself by approaching individual gasoline companies. And one of them told me, there was a guy here the other day pushing a system almost identical to yours. And I go, really? I never heard of that. And they put me in touch with him. His name is Barry Munro from the Canadian Spinal Cord Research Organization. And I met with him within a day or two after that. I went to his office and he explained the fuel service system that he has, working with Shell. And it's basically an app you put on your phone. And when you need gas, you tap on the app. It'll list gas stations in a 15-kilometer radius who will guarantee that they will come out and fill your tank. So you push the station you want to go to. They text you back. If you arrive in the next half hour, we'll fill your tank. And if you want anything from the store, milk, soda, bread, whatever, they'll bring it to your car. Tap and go with your credit card, and you never have to get out of your car again. So I spoke to Louise. We thought this was the cat's meow, but we wanted to make sure we're doing this correctly and get the maximum amount of exposure for it. So Louise and I formed the Canadian Coalition for Mobility Challenge Drivers. And I believe at that time, Louise, you got, what's his name, from the SCI involved? Peter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was approached by Peter to, about getting this
Yeah,
involved because
get
he'll
as
be
many
very
people involved with it. And we tried to get as much publicity as we could. And Shell was very helpful, and they would be printing all these brochures. And Louise and I, wherever we had a chance to distribute these brochures, whether it was trade shows, hospitals, conferences, anything to do with, we know people with disabilities would be there, to let them know that this is a system that would solve that problem. And as a result of it, we came across with a bonus assistance out of it, and that parents that have children with disabilities, especially that now they don't have to leave their children alone in the car while they have to go and fill up their tank. They can stay in the car with their children while getting gas, which is a big relief for parents with children with disabilities. And it's starting to take off. We had a media launch last September 3rd, but we didn't get as much publicity as we hoped to spread the word across Canada, because now Shell did it on a pilot project basis when we were involved with them in the beginning, where it was in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. And that was so that they could work the technical bugs out of it, which they finally did. And now it's available across Canada and all Shell stations. So we're still working on it to get more exposure wherever we can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping to do is help you guys out, because I think that is a phenomenal idea. And Louise, what can you sort of add to that? I know Eddie covered quite a bit, but like maybe add a little bit to that if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. We're very grateful to Barry and to the committee for doing the work they've done. And like Eddie said, whenever we were at a trade show, or I remember being in the waiting room at a doctor's office at Lyndhurst, and so I had brochures, and I was going to speak to the OT and the PT, and also my physician there, and I just asked anybody here drive, do you guys, or do you transfer do you transport someone in a wheelchair accessible vehicle? And they said, oh yeah. And I said, well, you might be interested in this. And they looked at me like I had two heads, but then when I started talking, they were really interested. Brought that information over to the resource department, and talk to more people in SCI there. We're doing what we can, but I have two friends that are both in wheelchairs, and the husband and wife, and they love it. Like they said, oh my God, Louise, this has made such a huge difference, because, sometimes when you need gas and you don't have full service gas station, you're beeping, trying to get somebody's attention, it's very difficult. And especially that it's gone across Canada, because if you're taking a long trip, road trip, you're always worried, am I going to run out of gas? And where's the next gas station? And will it have full service at the time? So this opened up many doors for many people, and also for the elderly. Like, it could be raining outside. They're afraid they're going to slip and fall, or it's really wonderful. And I really looking forward to the day that hopefully that all gas stations will be able to provide, at least within a certain radius, that provide this type of service to everyone.
Definitely. And I just think, like, a lot of times it's able-bodied people don't think of these things because they don't have to, but until like your injury, it can happen to anyone, whether it's a tragic accident, whether it's slipping and falling on your driveway and breaking your neck, whatever it is, you can be disabled at any time. And I think the thing that strikes me is when able-bodied people are allies of the disabled community, and I think that is definitely a good thing to have. And I'm going to share this app everywhere I can, because I think it's a phenomenal idea. I think it's great.
Clayton, that you hit a nail on the head with when I'm out with my friends and we're able-bodied. all of a sudden they're looking at for curb cuts, and they're saying, well, okay, well, the ramp's over there. Like, they're looking before I even get to it. And, or they'll say, you know, I saw somebody parking in a handicap parking permit. They ran to the car. And like, you tell me why those people are using the handicap parking spot. And that's something else, you know, Eddie and I have been working on, and that we've advocated for, and we met with different, you know, government officials about it. But it's so frustrating. Eddie, do you remember we were at the CNE at the mobility show, and
Yes.
back in 2015, and we spoke to the officers that were giving out tickets. You know, unfortunately, there's only a few of them that work
Six
the
of
whole
them.
city of Toronto.
There's
Six
only
of them.
six for the entire city.
Yes,
Ridiculous. You know, they
I
say,
know.
here's a number to call if somebody violates the handicap parking space. But God knows when they're going to get there, because there's only six for all Metro Toronto. It's ridiculous.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, that's not good enough.
No.
Oh,
You know, but
so we met with, you know, Eddie and I tried to set up a meeting. Remember, Eddie? We won't mention names, but we
yeah.
tried to set up a meeting with the Toronto Police, who was looking after that division. Got nowhere with our emails, our responses went to government officials. We met with the Minister of Accessibility and Seniors back in when as Tracy McCharles, right? So,
Right.
and we also did a presentation to her advisory committee. We met with the Honorable David Onley at the time too. I mean, and the last person we spoke to was the Honorable Gila Martow, and trying to, you know, get more light to this too. But it's a struggle. It really is.
It doesn't make sense because, like I say, there are people who want to do good, but then there's other people who say, no, you can't. And that's what frustrates you, that you don't make any progress, but you keep on, because I've learned with perseverance, eventually you will. You know, it's like I say, you got to keep chopping on the tree until it falls down, you know.
Exactly. And sometimes, Clayton, you get people that have said to me many times, oh, Louise, why don't you just enjoy your life and just let things ride and don't worry about everything? And I'm looking at them like they have two heads. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, really? Like, you know, if we all did that, nothing would ever change, you know? And like, that's not who we are, right?
Exactly. And at the end of the day, like, if you don't speak up about the issues that affect the disabled community, no one's going to know about it. And that's exactly why I started what I started is, you know, I've obviously throughout my life, I've realized that there's issues that affect disabled people, but COVID really magnified the fact that disabled people are put on the back burner far too often, and we need to end it now, because I want the next generation to have a better life than I did. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Well, when
But
I
it's
give my little seminars, or anytime I get to speak to a group, one of the things that I always tell them, 100% of what people with disabilities need to make their life better already exists. You don't have to invent anything. What you have to invent is regulations to put them into reality. And
That's just it.
that's where the battle comes into play.
Yeah, and that's another thing that David Onley fights for. I actually interviewed him on my show as well, and he is just an amazing human being. Like, he is one of the smartest people I think I've ever met. He's definitely up there. He's so well spoken as well.
Yeah, I had him as a guest speaker at one of our Wave Empowering Youth Day. He was awesome with the kids, and he just kind of blew me away there too. He's a very well spoken and knows his stuff for sure.
Definitely. Well, is there anything else either of you would like to add to the topic here?
Well, if there's any, you need any brochures that you would like to have sent to you that you can distribute, or have people you know that would be interested, just email me your address and I will have them sent to you.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely get on that. Well, that's about all I have for you two. Thank you again for doing this, and we'll definitely keep in touch. It was an honor to speak with you two today.
Well, an honor to
Clayton,
speak with
thank
you as well.
Clayton, thank you for having us and for doing what you're doing. Keep up the amazing work, because we need more people like you promoting this and creating that awareness. And educating others that aren't aware. So thank you very much for everything. And say hi to your mom and say thank you to her too for
discovering us.
Yes, I will. That was all her, and I'll give her credit where credit's due, and I will send you guys a link out when this is posted. It honestly should be later tonight. I don't think I'll have an issue with editing and getting it out today.
That'd
Thank
be great.
you.
I wish you all the success in the world.
Yes, you too, guys. Thank you very much again, and have yourselves a good night.
You
Good
too.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.